That camp in the pine woods looks completely normal, and almost every decision in it is wrong. You have probably made all three of them yourself. The tent is broadside on open ground. The sleeping bag is flat on cold bare dirt, and the fire ring is smooth round river stones sitting a few feet off the canvas, with the firewood stacked beside it. So why did the people who wintered that same country for hundreds of years do the opposite of all three? 10 decisions in the order they got made. The 10th one explains the other 9. Almost nothing in one of those old camps was picked at the moment it was needed. It was picked hours earlier, sometimes months earlier, and it was almost always picked to do 2 jobs instead of 1. That is the whole system, and it is written down where campers never think to look, in museum collections, in archaeological site reports, in the notes of people who wrote down what they were looking at while it was still an ordinary Tuesday. We start where they started, which is with somebody standing still on a piece of ground doing nothing at all. Number 1, the ground gets red before anything comes off your back. When cold weather came on the northern plains, the big summer camps broke up and families moved. The Glenbow Museum records the Blackfoot practice plainly. People went into the sheltered coulees, the river valleys, and up into the foothills, where they were close to water and to a good supply of wood to burn. WYO History, the encyclopedia of the Wyoming State Historical Society, describes the Crow doing the same thing in the woody bottoms along the Wine River. The Plains Indian Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West puts it in one line. In the fall, people left the larger camps and scattered into smaller winter camps that were more sheltered. Notice what is being chosen there. Not a view, not a flat spot near the truck. Wind shelter, firewood, water, and game, all 4 in one decision months before the worst night of the year showed up. And that ground got remembered. Out on the plains, there are stone circles lying in the grass where lodge covers were weighted down, and they do not sit randomly. They cluster at the good sites, near water, near fuel, near hunting. Generations of people walked into the same country and stopped at the same places because those places had already been proven. Here's what that turns into on a Saturday afternoon. Before anything comes out of the truck, walk the ground for 10 minutes. Find what is already stopping the wind, a rise, a cut bank, a thick stand of timber, and get yourself on the sheltered side of it. Then look up, because you do not want your head under anything dead or hanging. Then look down, because cold air runs downhill after dark and pools in the low spot, which means the bottom of a little draw will sit colder all night than the shoulder 20 steps above it. 10 minutes of walking around doing nothing. It will do more for your night than anything in the store. That one habit, standing still and reading a piece of ground before anything comes off your back, is written down plain in a book called The Native American Way. 101 traditional remedies, skills, and recipes set out step by step so they do not get lost. It is for the kind of person who would rather know a thing than buy a thing. The camp skills are in there, and so are the old plant remedies, the teas and the salves, and the ways of putting food up for winter. Every one of them written so you can follow it with what you already own, instead of another $200 piece of gear that comes out of the bag once. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera, the same one you use to take pictures. Point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up, give it a tap, and it will take you straight to the book. And if you're watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Take your time. There is no rush at all. I'll wait right here. There is one more piece to reading ground, and it is the piece that catches people who did everything everything else right. Water. Every one of those old camps sat near water. It had to. But near is doing a lot of work in that sentence because the bank of a creek is one of the worst places on the property to sleep. Cold air slides downhill and settles right there. Damp comes up out of the soil all night. The bugs are worse. And moving water is loud enough to cover the sound of anything you might actually want to hear. The good ground is up on the bench above it, close enough that hauling water's a short walk, high enough that you're out of the cold sink and out of the wet, and far enough back that you're not sitting in the path of whatever comes down that drainage if it rains hard upstream in the night. That's a real risk in dry country in particular, where a wash can run without a drop of rain falling anywhere you can see. So, camp near the water and sleep back from it. Once the ground is settled, the next decision takes about 4 seconds, and hardly anybody makes it on purpose. Number 2, which way the door faces. On the plains, a lodge door opened east. The Buffalo Bill Center of the West says it in one sentence in its Points West article on the Tippy. When they were put up, the doorways normally faced east toward the morning sun and away from prevailing winds. The Colorado Encyclopedia records the same thing. Now, that gets described as a sunrise thing, and it is. But look at what else it does. On that country, the weather mostly comes out of the west, and the back wall of a lodge is the steep wall. So east door means the strong, steep side of the shelter is the side taking the wind all night long, every night, without anybody having to think about it again. 2 jobs out of 1 decision. You're going to see that again. There's a third thing in it that gets missed. A door facing east catches the first sun of the day, which means the shelter starts warming while the ground outside is still hard, and the damp that gathered overnight starts drying instead of sitting there. Anybody who has crawled out of a cold tent into a cold shadow at 7 in the morning understands exactly what that is worth. Look at the camp in the pines again. That tent is broadside. The long flat wall, the biggest sail on the whole thing, is turned out toward the open ground, and the door is open toward whatever happens to be in front of it. If the wind comes up at 2 in the morning, it hits the widest part of the shelter and pushes on it all night. If the rain comes sideways, it comes straight through the door. Here is the fix, and it costs nothing. Before you drive a single stake, stand there and figure out where the weather is coming from. In most of the country, that is west or northwest, but the ground you're on can bend it. So trust what you feel more than what you remember. Then put the narrow end, the low end, the strongest end of your shelter into it, and put the door on the far side. If you have a tarp, the low edge goes to the wind, and the open edge goes away from it. And if you are somewhere the morning sun matters, and in cold weather it always does, split the difference and let the door open toward the east side of the sheltered face. You will feel that decision at daylight. One more thing while you are standing there with the stakes in your hand. Guy lines are not optional, and they are not for storms. They are what turns a piece of fabric into a structure, because a taut wall sheds wind, and a loose wall flogs, and a wall that flogs all night will keep you awake and work your stakes out of the ground while it does it. Stake the windward side first, pull it tight, then work around. That is 30 extra seconds at setup, and it is the difference between listening to your tent all night and never thinking about it again. That was 2 decisions, and neither one of them cost $1. This next one is the one that hands a camper a cold, miserable night without ever telling them why. Number 3, what goes underneath a sleeper. The Milwaukee Public Museum describes the inside of a Great Lakes wigwam. Raised platforms were built inside to serve as beds and storage, and those platforms were covered with mats and furs. Inner layers of mats and grass went in for warmth and insulation. The cattail mats that did that work were prepared during the summer, rolled up, and carried to where they would be needed months later. Read that last part again. In August, when nobody is cold and nobody is worried, somebody is sitting in the sun, weaving the thing that will keep a person off the frozen ground in February. And that is the actual point. Off the ground, cold air is not what takes the heat out of you at night. Cold ground is. Air is a poor conductor, which is why a jacket full of trapped air works at all. The ground under a sleeping body is a solid in direct contact with you, and it will pull heat out of you steadily all night, no matter how good the blanket on top is. You can be under an excellent quilt and still lie there shivering, because everything you own is above you and there's nothing below you. The old camps solved that in every region and with whatever was on hand. Platforms in the wigwam country, mats and hides and grass on the floor of a lodge, piled evergreen and dry leaves in a quick brush shelter. Different material, same idea, which is that you build the bed before you build anything else, because the bed is the part that actually keeps you alive. So look at that camp in the pines one more time. The bag is lying flat on the dirt floor of that tent, and the person who set it up thinks the bag is doing the work. It isn't. Underneath a body, the fill in a sleeping bag gets crushed to nothing. And crushed fill has no air in it, and no air means no insulation. That bag is a blanket with a zipper the second the sleeper rolls onto it. What to do instead? If you own a sleeping pad, that pad matters more than the bag does. And the number to look at is the R value, which is just a measure of how well it stops heat from going down into the ground. If you do not own one, you can still build the old way. Dry leaves, dry grass, dead needles, and small dead conifer branches piled thick, then compressed by lying on them, then piled again, because that pile settles a long way the moment you put your weight on it. You want a hand's depth still underneath you after it has settled. One thing to check before you build that, and this is the part the internet skips. Cutting live boughs is not legal in a lot of places, and on public land it is often flat out prohibited outside a genuine emergency. Use dead and down material and check the current rules for the ground you are standing on before you cut anything at all. The old camps took what the country could spare, which is the same rule written differently. Number 4, the wall you cannot see. A teepee has 2 walls. The second one is the part hardly anybody knows about, and it is the best idea in this whole video. The State Historical Society of North Dakota describes it. Inside the lodge hangs a liner called a dew cloth, made of hide or canvas or blankets, and it only rises about 6 feet from the ground. There is a deliberate gap left between that liner and the outer cover. That gap creates a chimney effect, a convection current that circulates the air inside and pulls smoke up and out through the opening at the top. The dead air between the liner and the cover also insulates and keeps the lodge warmer in winter. The Pluralism Project at Harvard describes the same dew cloth as the thing that kept the interior dry and made a buffer against the cold, sometimes packed out with grasses. Look at what that one sheet of hide is doing all at once. It insulates because still air between 2 walls is one of the best insulators there is. It ventilates because warm air rising in that gap drags the smoke off the fire and out the top. It handles condensation because moisture from breath and from a fire condenses on the cold outer cover, runs down the back of it, and hits the ground behind the liner instead of dripping on somebody asleep. And in a hard, cold snap, you stuff the gap with dry grass and it insulates better. That is 4 jobs from one hanging sheet of hide, and you have almost certainly bought the modern version of it without ever knowing what it was for. A double wall tent is that idea. The inner tent is the liner, the rainfly is the cover. The gap between them is the dead airspace. And the whole reason the fly is not supposed to touch the inner tent is that the moment those two surfaces touch, the water on the cold outer surface wicks straight through to the inner one, and now it is raining on you from the inside. The tent in the pines is a single wall. One layer of canvas, no liner, no gap. Warm, damp air off a sleeping body hits that cold canvas, turns back into water on the inside of it, and by 4 in the morning the whole inside face is wet, and the sleeping bag is picking it up. People wake up to that and blame the tent for leaking. The tent is fine. That water came out of the person sleeping in it. If you have got a single wall shelter, you can build a liner, hang a light blanket or a spare tarp an arm's length inside the wall, leave it short of the top, and let it stop a few inches off the ground. You have made a dew cloth. You will feel the difference the first cold night. Number 5, the 2 ears at the top. At the peak of a lodge sit 2 flaps, worked from outside with long poles. The State Historical Society of North Dakota describes how they get used, which is that they are adjusted as the wind shifts, much like the flue on a chimney gets adjusted, so the smoke keeps getting drawn out and a fire can go on burning inside for cooking and for warmth. Comanche Nation Entertainment makes the comparison that really lands. The teepee's smoke hole had flaps that did not open or close around the support poles, which meant the top could be shut down tight in a rainstorm and keep the water off the people underneath. And when the smoke hole faced downwind, it gave the fire its draft and pushed the smoke out of the dwelling. And here is the part that makes the whole comparison. European chimney design meant that wind often pushed smoke and soot back down into the cabin and made a fire hard to light and hard to keep going in a strong blow. Think about that for a second. A fixed stone chimney is a hole in a fixed direction. A pair of adjustable flaps is a hole you can point. When the wind changed on a cabin, the cabin filled with smoke. When the wind changed on a lodge, somebody stepped outside, moved 2 poles, and the problem was over. The modern version of this is sitting on your tent right now, and you probably treat it as decoration. Those little vents at the top and the bottom of a tent are a draft system. Air comes in low, warms, rises, carries moisture with it, and leaves high. If you zip everything shut on a cold night because cold feels like the enemy, you kill the draft, and all the water your body puts out overnight stays inside with you. That is how people wake up in a wet tent on a clear night and blame the sky. Open the low vent on the sheltered side and the high vent on the far side, and let the air move through. Wind changes in the night. Get up and change with it. It takes 10 seconds. One hard line while we are on the subject of fire and shelter. A fire or a stove inside any enclosed shelter puts out carbon monoxide. You cannot smell it. And it has killed campers who did everything else right. A lodge with an open smoke hole at the top and a gap all the way around the bottom is a chimney with a room attached. A zip nylon tent is a sealed box. Do not put the 2 ideas together. Number 6, how big the fire gets to be. The Nebraska Studies History Project preserves a settler recollection out of eastern Nebraska from the 1890s, and it is one of the best pieces of camp instruction ever recorded because it was recorded as a complaint. John Gilbert, a government stage driver in eastern Nebraska, was friendly with Pawnee people who came to visit each fall On one of those visits, he walked down to the timber where they were camped and found them sitting around a small fire. So he did what almost every one of us would do. He gathered up an armload of brush and logs and built it into a proper blaze. The reply he got, written down and preserved, was that a man who builds a great, big fire has to go sit a long way back from it, while the small fire they already had let them sit right up close to it. There's a hard piece of physics sitting underneath that complaint. Radiant heat falls off hard with distance. A big fire throws more heat, but it also throws so much of it at close range that you physically cannot stay in the good zone. So you back off to where it is bearable, and at that distance you are catching a fraction of what it makes. Meanwhile, the fire's eating fuel somebody had to gather. A small fire lets you sit close enough that your whole front is in the warm. Your hands are usable. Your food cooks at a controllable heat, and the wood pile lasts the night. There's a second reason, and it is written all over that camp in the pines. Look at where the fire ring is. A few feet off the canvas with the firewood stacked right beside it. A big fire is a spark generator. All it takes is one gust in the middle of the night to put embers on a tent wall or into that wood pile. And canvas and nylon both take a hole from a spark without much argument. So keep it small, keep it well back from anything that burns, and clear the ground down to bare mineral soil before you light it, because the dry duff and needle litter you saw on the floor of those pines will carry fire sideways underneath the surface where you cannot see it. How small is small? A cooking and warming fire wants to be about the size of your two hands together, fed with wood no thicker than your wrist, sitting on a bed of its own coals. That is a fire you can lean over, reach across, cook on without burning everything, and put out completely with what is in your water bottle. Anything bigger than that is a bonfire, and a bonfire is something you look at. And put your back to something if you can. A bank, a big down log, a rock face. A fire throws its heat in every direction, so a good share of what it makes goes straight out into the dark behind it and does nobody any good. Sit with something solid behind the fire, and it throws that heat back at you instead of into the dark. That is free. It takes no equipment at all, and you will feel it the second you sit down. That is fire size settled. Now for the part that arrow in the corner of the screen is actually pointing at. Number 7. Which stones go around the fire? Here's a detail almost everybody misses, and it is the one that arrow is pointing at. The people who cooked with stones were picky about stones, not casually picky, systematically picky. Field records made among the Wintu and the Nomlaki of Northern California in the 1930s and 40s describe cooking stones as personal equipment. Smooth, round stones of a particular size, kept from one cooking to the next instead of gathered fresh each time, and brought up to heat carefully rather than thrown into a blaze specifically so they would not break. Somebody worked out, generations back, which stones held heat without failing, and kept those exact stones, so they knew stones break. They knew it well enough to build a whole habit around not letting it happen. Now look at that fire ring in the pines. Every stone in it is smooth and round. And smooth and round means one thing. Those came out of moving water. That is what water does to stone over years. And it is exactly why they look so good in a photograph. Stone that has sat in a creek is stone that is holding water inside it. You cannot see it, and it will feel bone dry in your hand. Put it in a fire, and that trapped water turns to steam. Steam takes up enormously more room than water does, and the pressure has nowhere to go. The stone cracks hard, and it can throw fragments out of the ring at speed. IFL science has covered exactly this, and the short version is that river rock is the one rock you should never build a campfire around. People have lost eyes to this. It is not a rare freak event, and it is not folklore. So do the old thing. Choose your stones on purpose, from high, dry ground, well back from any creek or lake or damp, low spot, and pick dense stone over soft, crumbly stone. Better still, on most ground, you do not need a ring at all. Scrape down to bare mineral soil, keep the fire small, and you have got a safer fire than any ring of pretty creek rock ever gave you. And check the rules where you are standing, because plenty of places require you to use an existing fire ring, and plenty of others forbid a ground fire entirely. Now, stones near the fire are one thing. Stones in the fire on purpose is where this gets clever. Number 8, the stones that go in the fire on purpose. Before there was a pot you could set on a flame, there was a way to boil water, and it ran on rock. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission describes it in its account of the transitional period. Heated rocks were dropped into holes in the ground that had been lined with hide and filled with water, as a way of boiling food such as nuts or fish. Rock was also set in fire pits to radiate heat for roasting. The Exarch Journal, which publishes experimental archaeology, has documented the basket version, where hot stones go straight into a tightly woven basket of water and bring it up to a boil. That practice leaves a signature in the dirt that archaeologists find constantly. It is called fire-cracked rock, stone that has been deliberately heated over and over until it split. There are sites where it piles up by the ton. Sit with what that means. Cooking for thousands of years across an enormous stretch of this continent ran on the fact that a stone will take heat from a fire, hold it, and give it back slowly somewhere else. And that is the piece worth stealing, because it is still true and almost nobody uses it. A flame heats the air around it, and the second the flame is out, that heat is gone. A stone charged in the coals is a battery. It is still working at midnight when the fire is a memory. So, on a cold night, set 2 or 3 dry stones at the edge of your fire while you cook. Not river stones, and we just covered why. When you're ready to turn in, roll one out with a stick. Let it cool until it is hot but not scorching. Wrap it in a spare shirt or a towel so no bare rock touches fabric or skin, and put it down by your feet inside your bedding. Your feet are where a cold night actually gets won or lost, and that stone will still be giving off heat hours after the coals have gone gray. Same principle. One more use of a fire you already had to build. That is the pattern again. Everything does 2 jobs. Number 9. The wood and the food, both decided in daylight. 2 quick ones here, and they belong together, because they are the same decision wearing different clothes. Wood first. Standing dead wood beats wood off the ground. And the reason is simple. Ground wood is lying in contact with damp soil, and it drinks. A dead branch still up in the air on a tree has been draining and drying in the wind, and it will light when the stuff at your feet will not. So the old habit is to gather dead standing timber, gather it before the light goes, and gather more of it than you think you need, because the pile always looks bigger in daylight than it turns out to be at 2 in the morning. Now food, and this is where the pattern gets its clearest example. Pemmican. Britannica describes it as dried meat, traditionally bison, pounded into a coarse powder and mixed with an equal amount of melted fat, sometimes with berries worked in, then cooled and sewn into hide bags. Dense, high in protein, high in energy, and stable enough to be stored and shipped long distances to feed people traveling in country where food ran thin in winter. The Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation adds the number that makes it real. A single buffalo yielded the meat, the fat, and the hide bag for roughly 100 pounds of it. 100 pounds of shelf-stable food from one animal, made in the season of plenty, carried into the season of nothing. Nobody made pemmican because they were hungry. They made it months before they were hungry. It is the cattail mat again. It is the winter camp chosen in the fall again. Every serious decision in that world got made while there was still slack in the system, and got made by somebody who was not yet cold, not yet tired, and not yet in trouble. Then compare that to how a modern camp actually runs. We decide dinner when we are hungry, in the dark, in the cold, with a headlamp in our teeth, and the decision we make is usually to skip it and go to bed. That is the worst possible choice, because a body burns fuel to make heat, and going to sleep cold and empty in the cold is how a merely uncomfortable night becomes a genuinely bad one. So decide it in daylight. Cook it early. Eat before you are cold, not after. And if you ever do want to try making pemmican or drying your own meat, follow current tested food safety guidance for drying and for rendering fat, because home preservation is exactly where good intentions go wrong. Now, everything so far has been a decision you can make tonight. This last one is a piece of engineering, and it has been hiding in every photograph of a teepee ever taken. Number 10. The lodge is crooked on purpose. Look at a photograph of a teepee, and it reads as a cone. Simple, symmetrical, a circle of poles leaning together. It is not a cone. It is not even close, and the Colorado Encyclopedia says so directly. From a distance, the shape looks symmetrical, but up close, what you are actually looking at is a tilted cone, steepest at the rear, sloping much more gradually down the front toward the doorway, with the smoke flaps at the top held forward on long exterior poles. The research guide from South Dakota State University describes the same thing. A tilted cone with the back a bit steeper than the front, built on a foundation tripod of 3 poles, with lodgepole pine preferred for the poles themselves. Reginald and Gladys Laubin spent decades documenting this and published it through the University of Oklahoma Press. And their explanation of the tilt is the good part. If the lodge were a balanced, even cone, the poles would cross at the dead center of the top. The smoke hole would have to surround that crossing point, which means it would be a big opening in the middle of the roof, and it could not be closed properly when it rained. Rain would come straight down onto the fire and onto the people. Tilt the cone, though, and everything moves. The floor plan turns from a circle into an egg. The crossing point of the poles shifts to the top edge of the smoke hole rather than the middle of it. Now the opening runs down the long front slope, where the 2 flaps can reach across and shut it completely against weather. The fire slides forward into a better spot in the room, and the steep back wall, the one you tilted up, is now the wall standing into the wind. That is one adjustment solving 4 separate problems: rain, smoke, wind, and floor space, all handled by making the shape lopsided. And here's the part that ought to stop you. Every single thing in this video has now turned out to be the same move. The east door was warmth and wind at once. The dew cloth was insulation and ventilation and condensation control at once. The fire heated the food and charged the stones that heated the bed. The buffalo gave the meat, the fat, and the bag it traveled in. The tilt of the lodge fixed 4 things nobody would even connect. That is the 1,000-year advice. And it has very little to do with being tough. Almost nothing in that system asks a person to endure anything. Because the enduring is what happens when the decisions were skipped. Every one of them got made early in the daylight by somebody who still had slack in their hands, and every one of them had to earn its place twice before it was allowed to stay. Go back to that camp in the pines one more time. There is nothing wrong with that tent, and there is nothing wrong with that sleeping bag. Both of them are better made than anything anybody had a century ago. What is wrong is that not one thing in that camp was decided. The tent went where the ground was flat. The bag went where the tent was. The stones came out of the creek because they were close and they looked right. Every single choice got made at the last possible second by somebody who was already tired. And the ground, the wind, and the weather will collect on every one of them before morning. 10 minutes of standing still would have fixed most of it. And that is really the whole of it. Not a secret, not a lost technique, nothing you have to go and buy. Walk the ground. Point the strong side at the weather. Build the bed before you build anything else. Give the air somewhere to go. Keep the fire small and the stones dry. Decide the food and the wood while the sun is still up. 6 habits, and every one of them is free, and every one of them was worked out by people who could not afford to get it wrong and had a very long time to get it right. That is the whole inheritance. That habit of deciding a thing before you need it and making every piece of camp do more than one job sits underneath every skill written down in the Native American way. The fire and shelter and water skills and the traditional recipes both. Now go ahead and grab your phone and open up your camera and point it at that square code on your screen and hold it steady for a second. A little link will pop up. Give it a tap and it will take you straight to the book. And if you are watching on your phone right now, the link is waiting for you right down below in the description. Now, if you enjoyed this video, you will enjoy the video right now on screen even more. I can assure you on that. Click it right now, my friend.